So for the development strategies chapter, I didn't just want to read a bunch of slides to you. I know that the last time was pretty close to that. I don't want to particularly do it. You guys can read too, and you certainly have access to the slides. What I wanted to do with this one is take you sort of through a real sort of example using the stuff that is actually in the book. And also I got a nice little sort of slide image, web image, which there's a link to in the content section. So I'll probably put the link in the description as well. So anyway, imagine that where we are right now in the software development lifecycle is that we've got all of our requirements done. So we know who our entities are. We know the data flows. We know the input-output processes, performance, and whatever the other one was, requirements. We have a pretty good sense how data is going to flow through the system. We have a pretty good sense how objects are going to relate to each other. We have got our requirements down, and now it's just a question of, well, what do we do now? Now imagine this example that we were building something that was like D2L, but of course we didn't know what D2L was, so we're calling it a course management system. And now we got to think about some considerations. What are the considerations to this? And I'll start off by saying that the first thing we're going to be thinking about is what is the hardware considerations for this. That's the first thing to think about, hardware. All right, because it's basically, are we going to buy our own hardware, build our own hardware, or borrow our own hardware? So as an example for this, let me take you to sort of a quick slide here, and let's beef that up a bit. As I say, I'll have that link in the description. But one possibility, I guess somewhere, it'd be somewhere in here, would be basically the idea of buying our own servers and hosting them in our own building, right? Or building our own servers. Now, you know, for example, if we want to have this actual D2L thing, what we could do is we could go down to Best Buy and buy ourselves a little server. Or what we could do, and some of you video game people appreciate this, sometimes what you want to do is you don't want to buy an Alienware machine, you want to build your own machine. Go to Newegg and build your own. Now, in the real world, I'll say that Oracle did something similar to this. They didn't have the software that could support, the hardware that could support what they wanted for their databases. So they ended up building their own database, and that was called Exadata. All that stuff would be sitting on premise, right, as basically servers and storage. But there is another option, and that's that borrow option, which I'm going to call IaaS, or Infrastructure as a Service. There is a possibility that what we could do is pay somebody like Amazon, for example, or Oracle, I think Oracle does this too, to basically host the hardware, and then we do everything else. And so back to this particular thing here, that's a decision we got to make. Are we going to go and are we going to do on-prem? And if it's on-prem, are we going to basically build or buy? And then the other one is it going to be IaaS, which is basically borrowing. And obviously, along with that, by the way, we've got to know things like how powerful is the machine going to be, you know, that kind of stuff, how much storage, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what's happening. That's one of the first decisions that we had to make. And in one of my examples where I talk, I don't know if I've talked about it here yet, but there was an example where I had to build a database for somebody. And I had to figure that out. Where is the database going to be? Is it going to be on a PC that they own? Is it going to be on a PC in some other, you know, hosted by someone else? Or do we go to the cloud, which is kind of like what IaaS is? So that's the first sort of consideration. The second kind of consideration is, what about the operating system? And we got some choices for operating systems, right? By the way, we have the similar on-prem and IaaS idea. And in fact, actually, let's have a look here. Yeah, the operating system, it could be our own. This is, by the way, another way to call this is bare metal. This is a bare metal installation. All we have is the metal. Or what we could do is go for a platform as a service and basically take whatever they're going to give us. Now, I'll remind you, there's several different operating systems out there. Of course, you guys are probably familiar with Windows. There's Linux. There's Unix, excuse me, and there's other ones. And even with these ones, we kind of got the idea of do we want to buy it? And in this case, what we're doing is we're buying support. Do we want to build our own distribution? Which isn't unreasonable to imagine. I know if we were into data science, for example, there are Linux distributions that are for data science. Oracle uses Red Hat. Red Hat is free, but the subscription model to maintain it is not free. We would also need to have engineers and whatever that actually knew how to run the hardware and the operating system. So in this case, we might be tempted to shift over to a platform as a service where we basically have someone else in charge of the operating system, and then we can kind of control some of these other things. You know, there's something right in the middle here, but I'll just leave it. So there's the operating system part. All right, so that's kind of what's going on with the operating system. Now, along with the operating system, the other thing, because this is D2L or course management system, we probably want to think about a database. Now, with the database behind this, we again got a similar deal. Actually, you know what? Let me do this quickly. This is going to be also on-prem or PaaS. All right, let's move you on this side, Ashley, just so it's a little bit different. All right, so copy paste. I really haven't captured everything there because, as I say, on-prem or PaaS, it's still going to be very much to build, buy, or borrow. Now, when it comes to databases, there are several different databases out there. A lot of times when I'm teaching a live class, I'll ask students, give me one of the examples, and almost always they'll go SQL Server first, which really cheeses me off because most people knew that I worked at Oracle. So there's another one. We got MySQL. We've got Ingress. I think Ingress, Postgres, MariaDB. We got a bunch of different databases. These things are all relational databases. There's another school out there. Oh, sorry, geez, I almost forgot. I should put them up here too. DB2. So SQL Server is Microsoft, Oracle is Oracle, DB2 is IBM, MySQL is now Oracle, but it used to be Sun. Ingress, Postgres, I can't remember who they are, and then we got MariaDB. And then you even have these things, IMS, which is which is a non-relational database, or for that matter, NoSQL. NoSQL doesn't mean no SQL, it means not only SQL is what that means. And that kind of gets us into the big data world. And again, we got the same deal here. Is this database going to be maintained by us? Or is it going to be maintained? Now, I'm going to go platform as a service. Right? So once again, we got that kind of decision there as to what to do with the database. And then finally, the last guy on our little thing here is there something already out there? This is the actual application, okay? Is there something already out there that does this? Let me get a couple arrows going here. So this is going to be for that. This is going to be for this. This is going to be for this. I'll just move you out the way. All right. So application. This is totally now build, buy, or borrow. So the thoughts that we're going to have at this point is, are we going to build our own CMS? Buy something like CMS? Commercial off-the-shelf software? are we going to go vanilla, which basically means it's the just take it as it is, or are we going to start manipulating it, or are we going to borrow? At which point now we're dealing with software as a service. So at this point, what we're looking at here is that somebody else has got basically the exact kind of system that would do everything we need, and we're now basically paying them to host it, and they basically just give us a URL or something like that, and we log on. I would suggest to you, by the way, D2L is, from a Hennepin or Dakota Tech's perspective, it is definitely software as a service. We neither college spends any money maintaining that thing at all. Not totally true. I mean, we do have somebody on the sites that personalize it a little bit, but when D2L goes down, it's not the colleges that are fixing it. We are taking it as a software as a service from MnState. So back over to here, let me just do a quick little formatting nicety here. So those are just some of the design considerations for this. But the other thing to think about now, depending on what we're saying here, is we got to think about, well, who is doing this? Who is doing this? And now we got a couple choices here. We can either have in-house developers. We can have contracted developers. And some of that, by the way, what we're going to be thinking about are they going to be co-located? Are they going to be offshore? And when you're doing this kind of stuff, the other consideration is, are these things going to be fixed price or time and, I think TN, time and materials? So what's going on in this discussion is, okay, thanks for the help there. All right, so I'm going to let me just do that same thing, just make that pretty and get that done, and good deal. I lost my bullet points, but you know what? Bullet points for losers, we're fine. So and let's make you big, bold, and expand. All right, so here's the deal. Let's go on again, assume that this is a CMS system for our college. Do we have the developers that could do this? Now, even if we do have the developers that could do this already working for us at our college, that doesn't necessarily mean we can use them, because they're probably working on other things. So we got to kind of think about resourcing here, right? Which is one of the reasons that we might be tempted to go for software as a service. If we don't have the developers, are we going to hire new ones to add to our thing? At which point we're in a very, it's interesting when you think about it. When you hire somebody to do this, to build the CMS system, that's awesome. But you know what happens is that when the CMS system is finished, do you still need all of them? And if you don't need all of them, do you have stuff for the other ones to do, or are you going to be in an uncomfortable position where you're going to have to start laying off people? Right, and I'll tell you, as a guy that's just gone through a recent layoffs, even if they're expected, are traumatic to the organization and to productivity for quite some time. Right, so you don't typically want to lay off unless you absolutely have to. So some companies went on and start contracting developers. They'll go to a company like Tech Systems, for example, or Tech Pro is the one I used to work for. And they'll say, we need to have a developer for 6 months that knows everything there is to know about Azure, for example. And so now sometimes, in my mind, they make the mistake. They bring in that developer that works in Azure, and that they don't cross-train or anything, so that when that developer leaves, no one knows what the developer did. I think most people have smartened up, though, to that. But you can bring in basically augmented workers. Now, one thing I'll tell you is that the contractors are likely going to be getting a higher bill rate than the initial employees, and the employees get pretty mad at that. But one thing they got to understand is that they're getting a higher rate because other things aren't being paid for. So as an employee, you typically get some kind of benefits. The contractors don't necessarily get those benefits, and so they get the money instead. The other thing I would say is that sometimes employees get a little bit frustrated because they go, hey man, we just had to let Bill go and now we've just brought in 3 contractors. What's up? How is that even possible? I can't even hire anybody to replace Bill. And the reason that is the case is likely because the budgets are coming from different spots. The budget that pays for employee salaries is coming from a different budget than the budget that comes from where the contractor salaries are. And it's maddening, but it's truth. So I know my budget, my contractors I got from the same budget as I could get my business cards. It was exactly the same account. So just be careful with that, because some companies will have money set aside in what I used to call it stapling machines, the stapling machine budget. I don't think anyone's got a stapling machine anymore, but the photocopier budget. So they got money put aside for that, and then some clever people go, well, we don't have any new photocopiers, but we could use a contractor for 6 months, so we'll bring it in that way. I mean, it'll be interesting to see in the next year or so as we attempt to recover from this recession that we're probably going to go into. We'll see how budgets get manipulated there. And then when we're dealing with contractors, we got contractors, do we bring them in and have them work with us? So, for example, there are plenty of contracting companies right here in the Twin Cities, and those people will work with us, right, in the team. They'll be on the same team. Do we instead talk to a company and say, hey, we need the CMS thing built, and we start getting requests for proposals? That's talked about in the book, RFPs. And a bunch of companies start bidding and basically say, we can get this thing done in like $1 million in 2 years. There's all sorts of neat stuff. I'll see if I can find the article, but there's a recent really neat case where something that affected all of us, and I think it was a driver's license or something, where the project never really was finished, and like millions of dollars was just flushed down the toilet, and they started suing the companies and all that kind of stuff. That's a thing when we're talking about using a company here or using a company offshore. It used to be the case that India was a pretty big deal, right? Especially as the internet became more mature. Rather than bringing a bunch of Indians in, they would basically have a team out in India under the idea that you could have 24-hour development, and that Indians, as a rule, were cheaper, and they were cheaper. A decent Indian developer was probably around the time of recording this was about 20 grand. So yeah, they are definitely cheaper, but then you got to deal with the fact of not being co-located. But it's not just India now. Definitely Eastern Europe opened up, and there's what we call cost-effective or low-cost countries. We got Chile and Costa Rica and Mexico as also under that. And believe it, even like the Japanese are even offshoring their stuff to the Chinese, which is, if you know their history, is really, really interesting. So anyway, there's this sort of offshore stuff going on there. Considerations that we'd want to make. And of course, the beauty of hiring a contractor in theory is that you could have, if it's going to take 10 people to do all this stuff, but only 2 people to maintain it, you could keep your 2 employees, bring in 8 contractors, and then at the end, let go of the contractors, right? That's kind of the way that would work. Not so much let go, I mean, you just basically have an end date. But it's really, really legalistic, as you might imagine. I said fixed price and time and materials. I think, actually, I don't know, to be honest, what's more common now. But fixed price is you basically coming in and or a company giving you a proposal saying that we're going to get this done in 6 months for $1 million. Time and materials basically says we don't know how long it's going to take, but we'll basically do this for like $10,000 a month. And then you usually at that point have to sort of predict like a month or 2 out and say, yeah, we're going to be done by the end of May, and then hope that you've lined it up properly. So I mean, this was basically, I think, the highlights in a slightly more dynamic view than just reading the slides. But definitely have a look at that because, and definitely have a look and be familiar with these ideas. Infrastructure as a service. Well, first of all, on-prem is you, or in this case, our college, is running everything on site. And we have people who have built the application, people running the database, people controlling the middleware, the operating system. By the way, we don't have to check all these boxes, but basically they have all the hardware, they have the operating system, the middleware, and the application, all run by us. We could have bought it, but it's all run by us. Then we have infrastructure as a service, where at this point we basically let someone else have the hardware, but we control everything else, including the operating system. Okay, infrastructure as a service. Sometimes, by the way, infrastructure as a service would also give you the operating system too. Then we have platform as a service, where basically they're going to give us the hardware, all the sort of internet technologies, and the operating system. But it's up to us to come up with the database and the application. And there's plenty of examples of those out there. And then software as a service is basically they will run the whole show, and of course with each of these there's going to be a different level of cost. They're a subscription model too, right? You basically either pay for time, or more regularly now you pay by usage. So this could be like $15 a month for 10 users, and as soon as you get to 20 users, then all of a sudden it shifts to, let's say, $30 a month or something. Of course, by the way, these are great when we're dealing with issues of scalability, because it's not really our concern anymore. You're hoping that they're scaling up. I would say, by the way, Google is the best example, I think, almost of software as a service, because I have no idea how Google runs. I just go into a web browser, I type something in, hit the go button. And there could be 10 people on Google at the same time. There could be like 10 billion people on Google at the same time. It's not my concern. It's a software as a service, and it's got a tremendous price in that it's free, as long as I don't mind them monitoring everything that I do. So that's sort of chapter 7. There's one more thing I want to talk about, but I'll talk about that in another video.